Alright, I'm going to lubricate the nut on this Fender Stratocaster, and that's not a bad idea to do to your guitars. And I'll talk about the truss rod and different things. A lot of people are petrified to work on a truss rod. So what I'm doing here is I've undone it, I've loosened it, strings are off, and here is the nut for the truss rod. See if my camera will let you see that. Step number one, whenever you adjust a truss rod, make sure you've got the right Allen. Make sure you got, because if you hog this out, you won't be able to get it out, and then the truss rod, it'll be ineffective. Well, unless it's already tight, but then you can't make any adjustments. And another thing, if you got a bunch of guitars, you can always mark your truss rods. Here's an old one, Floyd. Dinky. Check that out, it's got like a Gibson nut. So that's a tip, you know. So there was all kinds of finish on here, and I've scraped most of it off. I don't know if you can see that. There was globs of it. And you could feel it when you were turning the truss rod, you could feel the globs of, because it was really thick, I already did it. And this is what I like to use for nuts and for truss rods. It's graphite, kind of like graphite you'd find for locksmiths would use for locks. You can buy this anywhere. Put that right in the threads after you make sure you blow it out. These ones look pretty clean. So I'm just going to drop that in there. Always put the lid on your graphite, because if you get it on the rug or something, it kind of stings it. And I'm going to lubricate this end piece. I'm just going to use some lip balm. Got to use Kroger's though, because it's real special. Now you could use Vaseline or whatever. I'll probably have black lips when I use this come winter time. But anyway, I'm going to put it back in. Oi. Now she's lubed up. Actually, I'm going to put it in like this so all the graphite doesn't fall out. I don't want the graphite to fall out. And if you do take one out like this, you've usually got to give it just a little bit of pressure. Not a lot, but a little bit of pressure to get those first couple of threads on. That feels good right there. There we go. Tighten it back up. So a couple of things about truss rods. If you've never done it and you're afraid, I'm afraid. Don't be afraid. The first thing you should do is loosen it. I would never really tighten it first. See what it's like. Loosen it a little bit. And if you have a bow in the neck, like this way here, usually it's like that because the strings are pulling and it's causing the neck to go that way. If a lot of guitars are like that, they have a bow in it. Like I have a bass, and I can play it without the truss rod. The neck is that stiff. It's perfect. And a guitar like that. But some guitars aren't like that. Some guitars, when you loosen it, they go like this. The necks naturally have that bow in them. So anyway, when you're dealing with a neck like that, this is what you do. Don't count on the threads to pull on that thing, because you could strip that nut and or threads. Usually the nut will strip first before the threads on the truss rod. I think that's by design. But what you do is you can get somebody to help you. If you could hold on, like I have the guitar between my knees now. When you're turning it, always pull the neck back a little bit. I mean, don't snap the neck in half, but give it a little bit of a pull. And then adjust the truss rod. So then what you're doing is you're the one straightening the neck out with your hand, with your body, however you're doing it. And then you're adjusting the nut. And when you let it off, the nut's just holding it. You're not just going like this and, there's a good chance of stripping the nut out. That's really important. So don't be afraid to do this. If you have a bunch of guitars but you don't work on guitars, and there's a lot of people like that, which I think is sad. You should be working on your own guitars. But I would suggest if you're really afraid, don't adjust the truss rod on your R9. Don't mess with that. Start with one of your cheaper guitars, a Squier or something, And it's really easy. It's not hard. And I've done hundreds of guitars, and only once has a truss rod broke or something snapped. And it was an acoustic bass. It was a great story. It was an acoustic bass, and the guy who had it, his name was Skinny Bishop. I was always doing his guitars. He was always rotating guitars. And I said, dude, this neck is so, he bought it on eBay. This neck is so warped. It's really having a hard time. And I'm like, I'm afraid to go further. And he's like, no, go ahead. If something happens, don't worry about it. So I'm pushing on the neck. I'm not just letting the nut do the work. I'm pushing on it, tightening it. And all of a sudden, it sounded like a 22. It was about as loud as a 22 going off, like right there. I almost dropped the bass. But it was perfect after that. So I don't think the truss rod was ever going to work again, but that's the only time. And I am talking literally hundreds of guitars. I've owned over 150 guitars of my own. And I've worked on guitars, many, many guitars. So it's the kind of thing, unless you do something really dumb, get in there and do it. Don't be afraid of doing it. Just, follow some simple rules. And the first time out, don't work on like your super expensive vintage guitar. Work with something smaller and you'll have no problem at all. So anyway, I hope that helps. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Do something. Just like I said, make sure you've got the right size. The size is right. And always loosen it first. And there's all kinds of... I didn't have the internet when I was a kid. I had to learn things from magazines and books and that. And it's really not that hard. Setting up guitars, it's really not that hard. There's certain things like cutting the nut, that's an easy thing to screw up and you got to start all over again, but like adjusting the intonation and the action and the truss rod, it's like 101. This is like stuff anybody that's into guitar should learn how to do. Anyway, I hope that helps. And I'm going to get this Stratocaster. I'm going to get some 10s on it. Anyway, peace out everybody. Have a great day.